Hello and welcome to the Subjective Space with me, Sindhu Rajasekaran. This is the last episode for the year, and I'm so excited to have Sangeeta Pillai on the show. She's the founder of the South Asian feminist network Soul Sutras, which tackles taboos within the culture. She's also the creator of the multiple award-winning Masala Podcast and the Masala Monologue series. Sangeeta has won 6 British Podcast Awards and a Spotify Sound Up Award. A feminist memoir, Bad Daughter, was recently published to rave reviews. So I'm so happy to have you on the Subjective Space, Sangeeta.
Such a joy to be here, Sindhu. It's like serendipity that we meet in Kerala, and talk to each other. And here we are now recording a podcast. This is wonderful.
I
Thank you for
know.
having me.
I've heard about your podcast so much. So, let's start by talking about your award-winning podcast and what inspired you to start it, because it addresses, so many taboos about, female sexuality, sex, shame, periods, mental health, and so many other topics. And did you find that when you started it, like women in, South Asian women in the US and UK were sort of craving or looking for something like this? Because you do mention, how so many people have said to you and written to you saying the podcast
Yeah.
has changed their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think there's anything else like this, and there definitely wasn't when I started 6 years ago. Masala Podcast has been going. I started initially by running workshops with South Asian women in the UK. I could sense that there was a need for us to talk about these things, and I did about 20 workshops, turned the outputs of the workshops into 2 theatre shows. And I had a show in London, and about 100 people came. And they kept hugging me and saying, "Oh my God, thank you for doing this and for telling our stories." And that's when I thought, oh, I should maybe do something that reaches a broader audience. And I started to think about the podcast. And I didn't know what a podcast was. And I say this all the time when I'm giving talks. I had to Google what a podcast was because I haven't grown up with that. And I entered a competition with Spotify Sound Up. Someone sent me a link to a competition on the night of the deadline. And I dashed a couple of sentences off, never really expecting to hear anything. I got shortlisted. They had 750 people applying that year. I was one of 10 to get shortlisted. And then I went on to win the competition. And that's kind of how Masala Podcast started. There definitely wasn't anything like this 6 years ago. And even now, there really isn't anybody doing the work that I'm doing with the depth and the degree of openness and vulnerability, I think, that I bring to it. And there's a real need for this. And I think you mentioned it. I get messages all the time from listeners, South Asian women from all over the world. I get messages from young women in India saying they feel less alone because of the podcast. I get messages from the UK. I've had people say they get their husbands and brothers to listen to the podcast and they can understand what it's like for them.
Yeah.
And I think the most dramatic one, I've mentioned this in other interviews, is when I was in Kochi, where I am right now, 3 years ago, someone messaged me to say on Instagram to say, "I'm a huge fan of the podcast. Would you be up for meeting for a coffee?" And we met for a coffee in my favorite coffee shop here. And we were sitting across the table like this, and she kind of leaned forward and she said, "Your podcast literally changed my life. I was in a marriage that was abusive. And I stayed for a long time. I got pregnant, lost a baby. And then she said, through it all, I kept listening to your podcast. And one day I plucked up the courage to leave." So that to me was the most dramatic.
I think that is something that people still struggle with. I think as
Yeah.
South Asians especially, and
Yeah.
also in wider cultures, I've seen a lot of white British women also
Yes.
struggle with this because the
Yes.
British culture is also sort of
Yes.
give it a chance, make it work,
Yes.
kind of, right?
Yes. Yes.
So there is so much shame attached to leaving a
Yes.
marriage,
Yes.
even however bad it is. So
Exactly.
tell me a little bit about the sort of conversations you've had on the podcast about this, and how it is so important to shift that sort of mindset.
Yeah. I guess, as you rightly say, for women all over the world, like whatever culture you come from the time we are little girls, we are raised to aspire to marriage and kids. Like that's supposed to be the ultimate sign of our success. It doesn't matter what jobs we have, if it doesn't matter if we find the cure for cancer, it doesn't matter. Any of it doesn't matter. Are you married? Are you coupled up? Have you got children? Like, that's the mark. And it doesn't matter if you're white and British. It doesn't matter if you're American. It doesn't matter if you're Indian, and particularly if you're South Asian, like that's even more. And I think with the podcast, I've always tried to address things we don't talk about because I feel like those are the things we should be talking about. Whether that's our bodies, whether that's sex, whether that's shame, whether that's periods, whether that's mental health, porn, menopause. There are so many things we do not discuss because somehow it feels like a personal failing,
Yeah.
and that's rubbish because these are things that are related to us being human. And when we are human, these are the things we experience. So anything women don't want to talk about, I will talk about on the podcast. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do love the title, the Masala monologues, right?
Yes, yes,
So,
yes.
so tell me, is it sort of like the vagina monologues? Like,
It's
what's
exactly
the?
that. It's the vagina monologues, but for South Asian women.
Mhm.
Um, and again, I used that as a model where I get women together. So sometimes 6, 8, 10 women, we would meet in like an art center or a local kind of space. And I would really coach them on how to put down things that they were kind of worried about talking about on paper. And I would, because I'm fundamentally a writer, I would coach them on how to kind of put a narrative structure to it. So it's got a middle, beginning, end, kind of thing. And the purpose of the Masala monologues was literally for us to put on paper things that are stuck inside of us and then discuss those things with each other. And when we discuss those things with each other, we realize we're all the same. We're all struggling with the same thing. It's
That
not
must
that
be such a
different.
liberating sort of a thing, right? To
Yes,
just,
it really
you know,
is.
I've been in workshops like this where I've written something down. I'm like, I had no idea I had this thought in my head or like that it
Yes,
was
yes,
bothering
yes,
me until that moment.
yes, yes. And you realize like all women go through these things. We're all thinking these things, worrying about these things, worrying that we're the only ones feeling these things. And I think the kind of power that comes from putting it down in words, first of all, comes out of you. And then if you're able to read it to other people, which is what the format of Masala Monologues is, it's incredibly liberating.
So tell me about Soul Sutras next, your vision for this space. On the website,
Yeah,
you say to take those bits of our
yeah,
culture that work for us and to let go of the bits that no longer serve us. I
yeah,
deeply resonated with this because a lot of my work is also to do with the same. So let's dig into this a little bit more because I think that South Asians find it so hard to let go of things, even when it's like super misogynist and sexist, right? Because
yeah.
they're like, oh, this is our culture, but really, is that your
Is
culture?
that really our culture?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So
Exactly.
is culture meant to be shifting? So tell me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I started Soul Sutras because it felt like there was a real need for us to collectively think about what is our culture, what are the things that serve us as women, and what are the things we want to keep and not keep. And I think what you say very much is that we're handed this culture as if it was like written in stone somewhere, and it's not. We South Asian culture is thousands and thousands of years old. Even if you went back 4,000 years ago, what we think of as our culture wasn't the same. It was very different.
Yeah.
We were worshipping trees and sun and planets, and like that's how we lived. So it is very important, I think, for us to investigate and to be allowed the space to question things that no longer serve us. And even say, take something like periods, right? Say back in the day when women were pretty much like, you know, cooking all the time and cleaning all the time. Maybe you needed a day where you had rest when you had your periods, right? Maybe that's why that was created.
Yeah.
But now it doesn't make sense to say you need to go sit in a room for 4 days, right?
Yeah.
How does it make
Yeah.
sense in the modern world? So we've
Yeah.
got to be able to like challenge some of these things.
Mm.
The other complexity I find living in the UK, like I've, grown up in India most of my life. I've lived in the UK for 20 years. British South Asian culture, because it's been brought by somebody who moved, like, say, two
Mm.
generations ago, Their idea of culture is like 1950s India, which no longer exists, It doesn't even exist in India, that
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
But because that generation moved and felt like they had to hang on to it, and understandably, that's their roots, right?
Hmm.
So it's even harder in kind of these, other countries where we've taken these cultures, US, UK,
Hmm.
Canada,
Yeah.
because it's like a watered down version of the culture where, say, in India, it's evolved and moved on, and we might not be doing those things.
Yeah, it's so
So,
funny you say that because I've had the same experience because I grew up in India and then I moved, as an adult, like when I was 21. And I constantly see this, right? And people are like, oh, this is our culture. I'm like, actually, I just came from India and
yeah,
this is
I'm
not.
from there. This is not what we do.
Yeah, it's not. But I see that in Canada all the time as well, and
Yeah.
in the US. People hold on to these bits that are not sort of working for anybody anymore.
Yes, 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 yes. And particularly as women, like there are so many things. So look, I love South Asian culture. Like I'll wear the saris and I wear the colors, and I'm in India 3 months of the year every year because that's how much I love it and I feel the need to connect with it, right? But it doesn't mean that I will just blanket accept every single thing that's told to me. I, as an individual, as an intelligent thinking human being, need to be able to question something and say, okay, yeah, okay, you're saying that to me, but does that actually serve me? Does that make sense to me right now? And then have the freedom and the flexibility to say, actually, that bit doesn't work, that bit works. So I'm going to embrace this bit and not use that bit. And there's so many beautiful parts of our culture, you know.
Yeah.
There's so much to embrace. We don't need to take
Mm.
every single thing.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing you said about like the period thing really, like I thought about that too, because in some cultures, in some communities, the men cook on the days when the women have the
Yes,
period. I'm like, actually, that seems like
that's
a decent idea,
idea.
you know, you know. So otherwise, when are they cooking?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly. And also, I think it was meant to be like a time of rest because
mm,
women are like working like crazy. And there's 3 days
mm,
where you're like, well, you can't enter the kitchen. So we're going to sit in our room and read a book or whatever.
yeah.
It was meant to be that.
Yeah, but the misogynistic part comes in when it's all about the purity of the woman and
Yes,
like
it's
the
like you're
blood being,
impure. And,
yeah, like the
that's the
blood is,
misogynistic bit.
yeah,
Yes,
the blood is
exactly.
dirty. And
Exactly.
so tell me about this, we'll talk about Bad Daughter in just a bit because, that's like your badass feminist memoir because as a recovering good girl myself, it makes a lot of sense to me. But first, like, let's just talk about female sexuality a little
Yeah,
bit, right? Like, what do you
yeah,
think, what do you think about it is sort of, it's not just it's South Asians in South Asia and everywhere else in the world as well, because there is also this thing of like, oh, if you're like too sexual, you're trying to be too
yeah,
modern or
yeah, yeah,
Western,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
that in the West. And then in
yeah,
India, also, there is this thing of if you're too sexual, you're like loose or like you
yeah,
have bad morals or whatever.
yeah,
So
yeah,
since you
yeah,
know both cultures, you've been, you're
yeah,
in all these places. So what do you think it is about like why is the patriarchy so? Why does it hate female sexuality so
yeah.
much?
Because they are terrified of it. That's why they hate it so much, and that's why they shut it down. Because female sexuality is really powerful, you know? Think of what we're capable of. We're capable of bringing life into this world, right? We're capable of having multiple orgasms. We're capable of, being entirely self sufficient sexually, right? And that scares the patriarchy. And if you turn something, because I feel like even when I was in my 20s, I didn't really access my own sexuality because, there was this whole fear thing. Oh my God, you're going to get pregnant the minute you start thinking about a boy. Like it was that kind
Hmm.
of thing. Like that's is equal to
Yeah,
pregnancy, life is ruined,
yeah.
like in about 20 seconds, like that was it.
Yeah,
So,
sex education was basically
yeah,
that.
basically that, like
Yeah.
training, like don't think about it because it's going to screw up your life, right? So, I never really accessed, I didn't even understand it. I used to think, because I grew up in India in like the 1980s, that sex was something that men did and women were like these passive participants. And you just kind of, I say this all the time, like lie back and think of India, basically. That's
Mm.
kind of how I think about it.
Yeah.
And it's only I had to get to my 40s, I think, and live in another country and kind of expose myself to a lot of different things where suddenly I realized, oh my God, my body is so powerful. I have all this pleasure that I can own. Like nobody else needs to come in here to release this in me. Like I have this. And it's such a powerful feeling as a woman, right? And when you think of if you put a lens, so that's one part of it. And when we start to kind of own our own bodies, when we start to own our own pleasure, patriarchy is terrified because women may not need anybody else anymore.
Yeah. They may have sex for their own pleasure.
Yeah, for their own pleasure rather than anything
Yeah.
else. And then there's a couple of things that I feel like, then this is true of all women, of all cultures, right?
Mm.
We are taught that in order to access pleasure, we need to be a certain size. We need to look a certain way. We need to smell a certain way. Our body has to be hairless. We have to be young. Like all of these kind of, because what does that do if we think about it? It kind of disconnects us from our pleasure because it puts all these barriers like, right, you got to do this, 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 this. And then if you're really,
Yeah.
really lucky and you're like 2% of the population, then you can access it, right? And that's what
Yeah.
we are disconnected from that. And that is for every culture. I don't think it's just South Asian
Mm.
culture.
Mm. Mm.
Think of the amount of money women spend on, Botox and whatever else. Right? That's another lens. And the third thing I wanted to touch upon is like, if you look at our own culture, like think about Tantra, right? Think about the Tantra. And when I say Tantra, I mean like Asian Tantra, not Western Neo Tantra, which is about sex and weird stuff, right? Um, it talks about harnessing your sexuality to power different parts of your life. That's what Tantra is. It's using your Kundalini energy, your sexual energy, to sort of power up your creativity, to look at your relationships, to look at your relationship with money and people and all of that. And that's the other thing. So for me, I feel like patriarchy doesn't want women to access any of this. Because if we did, we'd become really, really powerful, right? Why would they want
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think this is something that I've thought about a lot as well, why the patriarchy forbids women from sort of accessing their own sexuality, because it's this, because once they figure out that I have all this
Yeah,
power, then they don't need the patriarchy anymore, or they're going to stand up to it, right? So
exactly.
talking about the patriarchy, I read in the Tower Hamlets Lies About You, where it says, I'm going to quote, her story did not start in the peaceful canal side flat in Poplar where she lives now, but in a Mumbai slum in the early 1980s. Her childhood unfolded against the backdrop of a violently patriarchal society, setting the stage for a personal revolution that saw her transform from a quiet girl who could not speak in front of her male relatives to a feminist advocate who uses a microphone as a weapon of choice. So tell me a little bit about your journey, Sangeeta, about how your experiences have, molded your choices and your life.
Absolutely. So I was born in Kerala, and my mother was married off to my father. And the story that was told is like he's really rich and he's got this business. None of it was true. We arrived in Mumbai to be with him and realized it was the slums. So I lived there at the age of 4 to about maybe 10 or 11. And it was horrible. It was really, really horrible, like toilets outside and no water and all that. And to add to that, my father was alcoholic and he was very violent to my mother. So there was a lot of physical abuse and violence in our home growing up, which was, as you can imagine, really, really hard. And for me, I think that watching that as a child really formed my feminism because I could see what happens when women don't have power, don't have money. My mother couldn't go anywhere because what she had children and she was dependent
Yeah.
on my father. So I think that really shaped me in a very fundamental way. That kind of is the fire of my feminism. That's where it comes from. And I was determined not to have a life like my mother's. And I kind of, resisted the whole arranged marriage and blah, 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 usual stuff that Indian women used to get then and even now, really. And I kind of started working in advertising. I moved to another city, eventually moved to the UK. worked in advertising there, and then set up Soul Sutras and Masala Podcast, and all my work about 6 years ago. And it really is informed by my early years, what I saw, what I experienced, what I witnessed happens to women. That is kind of what is the fire that pushes me forward. And there are some tough days. There are days when you wonder why you do what you do. Everybody has them, and I'm like, why am I doing this? There's no money, there's no whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
And then after, like, that's the fire that keeps me going.
So now tell me about Bad Daughter, right?
Yes.
Your feminist memoir for recovering good girls. So why did you think this was a good time for you to write that memoir? And I think, as I said, I'm a recovering good daughter myself. So I was, in my teenage years, I was a proper lesbian, right? And then in my 20s, because of the social imperative, I thought, oh, I'm going to give men a chance and all of that. I ended up writing Smashing the Patriarchy as a result. It's like I had to it was like me trying to be a good daughter in a sense. And then in
Yeah.
my 30s, I figured, you know what, my first choice was the right one. I just
Yes.
want women. Like,
Yeah.
I can't do men. So, it's like me. So I know the difficulty of like
Yeah.
being South Asian, being a woman, being brown,
Yeah.
being all of these things, sort of trying to undo these narratives that are put into your own head about what
Yeah.
it means to be good, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
tell me about Bad Daughter.
So I've been writing Bad Daughter for 7 years. It's actually older than my podcast. And I've been kind of thinking about getting this book out. And it is my story. It is the story of growing up in the slums and growing up being told that I was worth nothing because I was a girl, and really having nothing and still building everything in the world on my own, without a husband, without a father, without a brother, without any connections, right? Moving to the UK and kind of building what I've built. So for me, the reason I wrote it is two things. One is I'm in the podcasting world, and I kind of give talks, and I'm one of the thought leaders and all of that. But when I'm kind of in a judging panel with other industry bigwigs, none of them know where I've come from. They assume that I am like them, but I'm not like them. I come from a very different background. So I think one was for that, for people to know. It's one thing to say, hey, I'm a podcaster and I do the world's biggest South Asian podcast, but you don't know where I started. That's very important for people to know what I have overcome to come to this place. Like, for
Yeah.
somebody else to have created something similar, I've had to work a lot harder to get here. So I think that was one thing. But the other, probably bigger theme for me, is to sort of tell women that we spend our entire lives trying to be these good girls, the good daughter, the good sister, the good girlfriend, the good wife, the good colleague, the good citizen. We are brainwashed to be good. And it is so much in our system that we, even to say the word bad daughter, when I say it to people, they say, oh, I'm not a bad daughter. Like, that's the first reaction so many women
Yeah.
say to me, I'm a good daughter. Because it's so hardwired in us to be that. Because whatever the culture, South Asian culture, British culture, American culture, whatever, we are all trained from the time we're 3 years old to be good. And if we are not good, and if we don't fit into these little boxes that they've made for us, we are bad.
Yeah.
So I decided to own this bad daughter, because I was always told I was a bad daughter at home, because they're like, you're not getting married, you refuse to have children, you refuse to have a nice job, you refuse to dress a certain way, whatever the ideas of womanhood was. And because of all of that, I was always labeled a bad daughter. And I decided to just own that label. I'm like, yeah, and I'm a bad daughter, and I'm really proud of it. And look at where it's brought me, being the bad
Yeah.
daughter. If I'd been a
Yeah.
good daughter, I'd still be stuck in Mumbai washing some man's underwear,
Yeah. Yeah. You do say that good daughters don't change the world or
No,
something like
yeah,
that in
yeah,
the
because good girls don't change the world. They
good
don't,
girls. Yeah. Yeah.
because we stay quiet and we accept what is given to us as a good
Yeah.
girl. We just
Mm.
kind of are polite. We don't
Mm.
call people out on their bullshit.
Mm.
And that happens in every sphere of life. Like,
Mm.
whether at work, some guy pipes up and he's, in corporate spaces. I used to be in the corporate world. a man will come in and say the same thing you've just said louder, and somebody else like, oh, that's such a good idea. And you're
Yeah,
just saying,
yeah.
and you're too polite to say anything
Mm,
at work. The same at home.
mm,
You're like, oh, what you just said. So many women stay in difficult relationships or unhappy relationships because they want to be good, because they want to be accepting, and because they want to like adjust and get on and all of this stuff. So for me, it was very much like owning that label of saying, okay, yeah, I'm a bad daughter, and look at what I've done.
mm.
Look at this kind of army of bad daughters that I am creating to
Yeah.
really change the world. Like that's how I see it.
I think you've done a brilliant job of, just having the title, just people to just for people to be like pick up this book and be like, you know what, I'm going to be a bad daughter. It's okay.
Yeah, it's
It's
okay.
not. It's breaking
It's
the
not a bad
taboo.
thing. And here's the
Yeah,
thing, being a bad daughter is not a bad thing.
yeah,
It
yeah,
just
yeah.
means you're challenging the things that are pushed down your throat. That's it.
Hmm. So tell me a little bit about these like these patriarchal power figures that we've somehow built up. Obviously within the family there is always the man who is
Yeah.
somehow considered the head, even if he's fucking useless. you
Yes.
know. So he has to be the head of everything.
Yes.
And women are sort of pulled to listen to this man, for whatever reason. And then, as you say again, I've also seen this in corporate workspaces, even in academia, like just because you're a man, like you're
Yes.
expected to know more or have the
Yes.
right morality somehow, even if he's a freak. I mean, look at Trump and Musk, right?
Yes.
That sort of
Yes.
ties into the thing. I mean, these two guys are they the most moral people in the world, right? And they stand for,
Yeah.
the right culture and all of that. So what are your thoughts about this sort of thing and how women fit into this?
Um, the world has been run by men for a long time, and we've been brainwashed into thinking that that's power, that's what power looks like. And because we've grown up in systems, whether it's when we go start working in academia, when we're at university, at home, that's all we've seen, right? And so we take that as a given, like that's just how the world is. But it shouldn't be. I mean, look at you, the two examples you used, excellent examples you used. This is what happens when you allow patriarchy to go unchecked. They are the embodiment of all that is wrong with patriarchy and masculinity today. Uh, the way they behave, the things they say, their beliefs, the things they're shoving down the throats of the rest of the world. And it really makes, I mean, if anybody today thinks that's the way forward, I mean, despicable. That is despicable.
Yeah.
And the reason they've come into power is because we've created a world that elevates that. Even before now, the number of young men who've told me, oh my God, I want to be like Musk years ago, right? Because he's seen as like, oh my God, he's aggressive and he's got money and he
Yeah.
doesn't give a shit. But
He's the
that's
alpha
the
bro.
alpha bro, right?
Yeah.
And there's so much wrong with that. Look at what they're doing to the world, and they will
Mm,
continue to do to the world.
mm,
This is what happens when we allow patriarchy to be unchecked.
mm.
And as women, I guess, what can we do? We can challenge. That's all we can do right now. These are the people in power, but we've got our voices. We've got how we spend our money. We've got who we vote for. We've got power. So as women, all we can do is just challenge and challenge and challenge and stop accepting it. The minute we accept and say, "Oh, that's just how it is," we've given up, and I
Yeah.
don't think that's the right way forward.
So this is something that I've noticed a lot, like, in all kinds of discourses, even in political discourse and like in personal, say, family, social discourses. To assassinate a woman, like as in her moral character, it's always to do with like something to do with her sexuality
Yes,
or her
yes,
personal stuff.
yes,
Whereas for men, those things don't stick as much as they do for women. Like as you said, it doesn't matter if she's found the cure for cancer, right? So
yeah,
if she's not a good wife or a good
yeah,
daughter or a good mother or something, that's
yeah,
uh, what sticks. Like something like bad daughter, right? That sits right in the middle of, I
yeah,
think,
Yeah.
breaking, like chiseling away at that thing that we have. So tell me about why do you think, and for South Asian women, right? If you can speak to the idea of why we should sort of not let these things stick to us, because it takes a toll on the women
Yes,
too.
it does. Of course it does. Of course it does. I mean, think about the time, each time you don't voice what you feel at home, say, right? Or you shut yourself down at work, or with you're at university, or you're traveling on transport. You're making yourself smaller. You're not allowing yourself to be who you are. And when you do that over the years, you shrink and become smaller and smaller and smaller. And then they don't even have to shut you down. You will shut yourself down. And think of the loss of that. That's the real tragedy, I think, that happens when women kind of accept the norm, and kind of go along with it. Particularly in South Asian culture, like you said, being obedient is the biggest trait when you're for your parents, to be the obedient daughter, to be the
Yeah,
obedient to. And what does that mean? What does that look like? It means, I don't know, learning to cook, getting married, whatever. These are the kind of
dressing
markers of
proper.
dressing proper.
Yeah.
What I've worn today is like really improper.
Yeah,
Too much cleavage is being shown. So
yeah,
that would make me the bad daughter, the bad girl. And these might seem like small things, but they're not small things. They affect how we feel about ourselves, how we show up in the world, how we walk, how we use our voice or don't use our voice in every area of your life. So it's very, very, very important for every single woman to really start to trust herself, because that's, if you don't trust yourself, you're not going to be able to like go out and say the thing. So I think start to trusting yourself, and then having the courage to challenge, to ask questions, and to say, no, I don't believe that. I don't agree with that. I have a different thought on that, whatever that might be. So I think it's really, really important.
I think that's very well put, because I think the biggest thing that we lose is ourselves, in a sense. Like, who are you? Like, are you a human being worthy of just
Yeah,
existing for yourself? Like, do you have to just do it for this person and that person and
yeah,
society and whatever? So
yeah,
I think that's beautifully put. So I think that leads, me to my next question to you, actually, very well. I really enjoyed reading your piece for the Guardian, where you wrote a couple of
yeah.
pieces for the Guardian, but this one was really something that resonated with me. What to do when alone at a posh party? I danced with strangers and had the time of my life. So you were in New York for
You.
I think a podcast
Yeah, so I
launch.
launched Masala Podcast in America, and I had a launch party in New York in a really cool restaurant near Times Square.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a Diwali. It was a very flashy Diwali party. Like all the powerful people,
Yeah,
powerful South Asian people in New York were there. And I was like, I'll
all
just buy
the
the ticket.
rhinestones and
Yeah, yeah,
everything.
yeah. Like everyone's like sparkling in diamonds, and like
Yeah,
anybody was there. And I
yeah,
knew nobody, like literally not even one person.
yeah,
So I walked in, and there was that moment where I'm like, God, I don't know any of these people. And they all know each other, and they all were like
mm-hmm.
hanging out with each other. And I was like, well, there are two choices. Either I can just sit here like a wallflower, and sort of say, oh my God, no one knows who I am, or, nobody knows me and I can't really speak to anybody. Or I can just get out there and dance and have a great time. So
Yeah,
I just got up there and started dancing. And then when I started dancing, a couple of women sort of joined in. And then I met like 4 or 5 women who I still know. We're connected on social media.
yeah,
So I think and it takes courage to do that, to go to a new city where you don't know anybody, to go to a party where you don't know anybody. Not just that, but to go to like a big flashy party, it was quite like fancy. The people were like wearing designer clothes, and the makeup was on point, and you could tell
yeah,
that there was a lot of money. And they all were
yeah,
like, I'm head of this and I'm head of that, and all of that.
yeah,
So it took a lot of courage, but I'm like, well, that's what I'm going to do. And I had the best
yeah,
time. I had the
yeah.
best time.
I'm so glad you wrote that, because I think a lot of people have this thing of getting comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, right?
Yes.
To just put yourself in places
Yeah.
where you feel like, oh, I don't belong here, or I
Yes.
might not fit in, but just go give it a chance. And
Yes.
then and especially, like, I find this with a lot of South Asian women. They have these so many barriers to their
Yes.
own. They put it on themselves, like, oh, I don't look good enough, or I won't fit in there, or whatever reasons.
Yeah.
And I feel like they just don't do it, like, and
Yes.
this is obviously, this is in the context of a party, but this is
Yeah.
also true with work related
Yes.
things, or they just disqualify themselves.
Sells immediately. My God,
Yeah.
so many women. So, so I run a podcast. I also teach podcasting.
Mm,
Sindhu, the number of women that come to me and say, "Ooh, I've thought about starting a podcast, but I'm not really sure my voice is right. I'm not really sure. I understand technology. I'm not really sure."
mm,
And they're all just reasons because we don't believe we can do it.
mm,
We don't believe that we have the ability to do it. And, you know, I used to experience that too. And sometimes I still do. Like when Masala Podcast was winning awards, right? I would be up there. The other person winning would be someone from the BBC, someone from Channel 4. Big, big teams of people would come up. And I would be like one solitary Asian woman going up to pick the award, right?
yeah,
And I would sometimes feel like, what am I doing here? I don't fit here. I don't.
yeah,
But like, who cares? My podcast has won an award just as much as the BBC podcast won an
yeah,
award.
like the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome. I don't know any of this because I didn't know. I'm not from the audio world. I'm
Yeah.
not from media. I don't know
Mm,
anyone at the BBC. Like those are the kind of things. But I have to just say, yeah, and so what?
mm,
So what? And that's the
yeah.
question I would say. But yeah, okay, you don't. But so what? Your podcast has won an award. The other award winner has 20 people working on their team and all
Mm,
the resources of the BBC or Channel 4. And you've done it
yeah,
on.
yeah, I
So
mean, yay.
be there than anybody else. So, but I had to do that talking to myself because the first instinct is, oh my God, no, 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 I can't, I can't, you
Yeah,
know, because
yeah,
that's what we're grown up believing. And then you have to like give yourself a talk to say, and why not? And
yeah.
what is that voice? So I feel like we have to constantly pick that voice that's in our heads and saying, no, I'm not really sure. And then say, really? Like, why do you think that? And then have another kind of argument against it to say, but look, you've done this before, or you've done X or Y, or basically talk ourselves into it, really.
You really honestly are so inspiring, Sangeeta. Like, just to like, listen to you talk, and to like really just give yourself the like, inspire people, women, to give themselves a chance to be like, you can do this, like, try it, like, just,
Yeah.
don't be scared, sort
Don't be
of. and
scared.
and
Yeah.
it's also, it's good to sort of know that, you can sort of restart in life, or like you can
Yes.
just,
Yes. My God,
it's like
yes.
the past doesn't define you, kind of.
Exactly. Sindhu, I'm 53 years old.
Mhm. Cannot
Started.
tell.
Thank you. I started my podcast at what, 46? So without a single clue about podcasting. I've written a book at 53, my first ever book. So nothing is too late or too much or too anything. It's
Mm,
entirely up to us.
mm.
Entirely.
Yeah. Thank you, Sangeeta. I think that really sums up, like, our conversation, and like all the stuff that we've spoken about, because I think there is so much need for South Asian women to go out there and to just take what's theirs, to take space, to own like themselves, in a sense. And I think your podcast, Masala Podcast, does a brilliant job of that, and Soul Sutras too. I think is a great space for women to come find these things. And everyone listening, I urge you to go read her new book, Bad Daughter. I think it'll really, yes, break a lot of taboos for you. So thank you so much, Sangeeta, for joining me today.
Thank you so, so much. For anyone listening, feel free to say hello. I'm on Instagram, Soul Sutras. I'm on LinkedIn, as Sangeeta Pillai. My website, as Sindhu's just said, soulsutras.co.uk. The book is under baddaughter.co.uk. So just say hello and, yeah, just come say hi. It's been an absolute joy to speak to you, Sindhu. I'm so glad we met very briefly at the book festival.
I know, and I'm glad we made this happen. So this
Me
is
too.
great.